Bodies littered the grounds of the military base as a young boy walked through the chaos with complete indifference. He showed not the slightest remorse for all the blood that had just been spilled. He had only one goal in mind: to find Asaka. The door opened, and there she was, a gun pointed at her face, being held by a strange woman. Asaka couldn't believe Yogairai had made it all the way to that place, but his captor didn't hesitate to threaten to blow his head off if he came any closer. Yogairai barely looked at her. A second later, the woman fell dead to the ground. Asaka still didn't understand what the hell had just happened, but Yogairai didn't say anything. He just seemed relieved to have her back. It all turned out to be a dream. Yogairai woke up on a bus with a strange girl talking to him. Her name was Tamachika. She was nervous, wondering how he could still be asleep after everything that had just happened. The floor of the bus was littered with corpses, and no one had any idea what to do. From outside, something was moving. The tentacle was writhing. Yogairai reacted quickly, freezing the microphone connected to the appendage that had pierced one of his companions and making him writhe in pain. Then the creature rose, revealing a grotesque and threatening form. Tamachika was already presumed dead. They had no way to confront such a monster. But when she got too close to Yogairai, she lunged at him, and that was enough to upset him enough for the creature to drop dead. Tamachika had no fucking idea what had just happened. Yogairai casually pulled out his handheld game console while she pleaded with him to be serious. In the end, he agreed and asked her to explain what had happened. According to Tamachika, it all started as a normal field trip. They were traveling by bus when, after passing through a tunnel, they found themselves in a sunny meadow. There, a woman named Cheyenne showed up, claiming to be a sage. She seemed friendly at first, but when the teacher asked what was going on, she ripped his head off without hesitation. Cheyenne said she didn't mean to harm anyone unless they angered her. She tried to make a stupid joke, but it was so bad that she killed the driver for its lack of grace. She then explained that they had all been summoned to that world to become sages. This world was ruled by them, and now they needed new ones. She raised her hands and installed a battle system with a status window for several students. She granted them gifts, but some received nothing. Tamachika was one of the unlucky ones, along with Ayaka, Yuakairu, and the sleepyhead Yogairai. Shaun was clear: they had 1 month to become sages or they would die, and those who didn't receive powers simply fell on hard luck. They were basically cannon fodder. After that, the woman announced that the first test was coming. A dragon would attack them. A classmate checked her menu and found information about the dragon. The class organized, revealing their abilities, but ignored those without any. They left without a word, abandoning the giftless as if they were trash. Yogairai was still asleep, so Tamachika tried to wake him. But by the time she managed, it was too late. The dragon was already attacking, and the slaughter began. The only reason they were still alive was because Yogairai had effortlessly killed the beast. Now she understood they were in another world, and since there were no electrical outlets, she had no way to charge her game console. As they were leaving the bus, 3 flying companions appeared: Hikishida, Fukuhara, and Hanakawa. Tamachika couldn't believe they were flying, but Yogairai was already ready to kill them. She stopped him, at least to hear what they wanted, but he didn't forget that they had been left behind to die. The newcomers were shocked to see the dragon dead and Tamachika alive. They admitted they planned to revive her corpse as a zombie and do things to her that couldn't even be told, all right in front of her. It was then that Tamachika realized Yogairai was right. Those bastards weren't good people. Hikishida launched a fireball that tore through the bus and carved a mountain of pure power, just to intimidate and force Tamachika to surrender. He said he would do whatever he wanted in that world, starting with her. The other 2 were not far behind with their disgusting threats, but Yogairai, unfazed, pointed his finger at him and told him to die. Hikishida fell, unable to understand what had happened. The other 2 didn't understand either, but they were beginning to realize they weren't dealing with just any idiot. Yogairai ordered them not to move. One of them, Fukuhara, knelt down to assist the other, but as soon as he did, he too fell dead. Only Hanakawa remained paralyzed. Yogairai looked at him calmly and repeated the warning: if you move, you die. Then he asked him to verify that his companions were really dead. Hanakawa approached, tried to use his healing ability, one that supposedly worked even for fatal wounds, but it had no effect. It was clear that there was nothing left to heal. He tried to justify his people by saying that perhaps he had gone too far with what he had done, but in the end, it was they who came with the intention of kidnapping Tamachika for their own purposes. Then Yogairai explained what his ability really was: instant death. If he wished for someone to die, it happened. There was no resistance, no defense, and if anyone even thought of killing him, he sensed it and he killed them too. Simple, lethal, impossible to counter. Hanakawa broke down. There was no way to win against someone like that. When Yogairai asked him why he thought he was so untouchable after receiving his quirk, he confessed that it wasn't his first time in that world. He and his companions had been summoned before by the mages of Aemon Kingdom to defeat the Demon Lord. They had adventured disappeared for a year until they achieved their goal. Then, they returned to Earth and discovered that only a few hours had passed there. So yes, there was a way back. Yogairai, armed with this information, planned to eliminate Hanakawa so as not to leave any loose ends, but the man begged him for forgiveness. He tried to get help from Tomochika, but she wouldn't have anything to do with him. Desperate, he took out a bondage collar, put it on, and was bound to Tomochika's will. She wouldn't bear the burden, so she handed control over to Yogairai. The man, now forced to obey, was sentenced to stand in the monster-filled forest and leave all his valuables lying around. Tomochika asked him if he wasn't going too far with that sentence, but they weren't friends and knew he could betray them again at any moment. When she asked him why he continued to care for her, he replied that it was his choice to trust her, although he also mentioned her physical attributes as a possible motivation. She blushed and reacted with discomfort, while he didn't seem too aware of the impression he was giving. Elsewhere, Shaun was receiving Uchi's report on the summoned students. They had supposedly completed the first mission, but with 4 casualties. 2 of them were ungifted, which was expected, but the other 2 did have abilities, which was even stranger. Still, Shaun didn't seem too worried. Meanwhile, Yogairai and Tomochika arrived at the city gates just as they were closing. The guards didn't understand their language, so they were kept in a tent until the gatekeeper, Masahide, arrived. Luckily, he spoke Japanese and had already dealt with their classmates. Although he normally had to charge them a toll, he had orders not to interfere with the sage candidates, so he let them pass. Masahide watched them closely, and while Yogairai seemed calm, Tomochika grew annoyed when he suggested she could stay at his mansion that night, but only she. Tomochika immediately rejected him and dragged Yogairai out of the place before she could kill him for being loudmouthed. He didn't even understand why she thought he'd do something like that, though. Well, he'd killed classmates for less. Once in the city, Yogairai was surprised by the imposing nature of the place and the presence of people with beastly features. It was then that a cat girl named Mariu appeared. Very friendly, too. She offered help straightforwardly and, without much subtlety, told them that she hoped to get along with the candidates for Sage. Her logic was clear. If any of them succeeded, she wanted to be close to ensure a good life. Tomochika didn't quite agree with his approach, but at least she respected his honesty. Mariu promised he wouldn't try to seduce anyone who already had a partner, especially for fear of possessive girls. So, seeing nothing dangerous in her, they accepted her help and decided to explore a bit before dark. Of course, it was a trap. After wandering around the city, they ended up surrounded by a group of thieves. Yogairai tried to negotiate, but they didn't want any money. They were looking for weak candidates to get even with, fed up with the sages with great powers wreaking havoc everywhere. They planned to kill Yogairai and use Tomochika for foul purposes. With his intentions now clear and no way to avoid the fight, Yogairai prepared to act. Tomochika asked Mariu to stop them, but she still thought he couldn't be that strong if he didn't have a quirk. She was greatly surprised when the punishment began. First, he turned one of the guys into a vegetable. Then, he tried cutting off body parts of another guy without killing him immediately. He wasn't being gentle. It seemed more like he was torturing them. In the end, he decided to finish them all off. Mariu tried to get out with a sad story, saying he was doing it for his sick brother. But it was too late. Yogairai had heard enough. They tried to kidnap them, sell them into slavery, and yet they still wanted to walk away. Yogairai wasn't going to be tempted by cheap redemptions. Without hesitation, he ordered them both to die. But this time, to everyone's surprise, nothing happened. They were both breathing. Gratefully, they ran off with their tails between their legs. Tomochika asked him if he had let them go. But no, Yogairai is unforgiving. His ability is always 100% effective. It was only a matter of time, and so it was. Just when they thought they were safe, the effects activated and they both fell dead. No one mourned their deaths. With all the idiots out of the way, Yogairai and Tomochika continued on their way. But before they got too far, they were stopped by the city guard. Apparently, the number of coffins requested had been so high that it aroused suspicion. Yogairai tried to get out with a cheap excuse, saying he'd already found them dead, but it didn't work. The boss, Adalgert, had been watching them the whole time. She saw the corpses fall just before they attacked. According to her, they were using Yogairai and Tomochika as bait to catch the head of a slave ring. And of course, that justified watching from a distance as they tried to take them away. She also said that the sage candidates' gifts didn't work on the guards, so they'd better cooperate. However, a subordinate used his appraisal skill and revealed that neither Yogairai nor Tomochika had gifts, so there was no logical way he could be responsible. Without proof, they couldn't be arrested. Adalgert had to admit defeat. The guard apologized, and Yogairai, instead of being uneasy, asked for something more useful, a place to spend the night. The man excelled. He got them luxurious, elegant, and comfortable accommodation. Tomochika couldn't believe it. Yogairai even offered to share a room with her. She, red-faced, opted to stay next door. Alone in her room, she remembered that without him, she'd already be dead or in chains. chain. As she tossed and turned in bed, a floating spirit appeared above her. At first, she thought it was her sister, but no, it was Mocha, her family's guardian spirit. Mocha didn't want anything to do with her sister, but she did come to protect Tomochika because what was coming was messed up. She confessed that she was terrified of Yogairai because his power could make her disappear even from the afterlife. That's why she preferred to warn him before revealing herself. Furthermore, she revealed that she was the one who prevented the battle song system from activating in Tomochika's body. She did so to protect her, as allowing that system to take hold means losing complete control of oneself. Although this left Tomochika at a clear disadvantage, Mocha didn't consider it a mistake. The important thing was to keep her free. Her true goal was to train her so she could return home and become the heir to the family martial art. Thus began a grueling, all-night training session. At dawn, Tomochika went down to meet with a weary Yogairai. He had something to tell her. They had obtained information about their companions thanks to a woman named Celestina. She not only tracked their location, but also gave them translation and status cloaking items, and even built a charger for their console. She also secured 2 train tickets that would take them directly to the capital. Yogairai appreciated their efforts, and since they still had gold stolen from the previous idiots, he asked Celestina to invest it for them. Everything was going well until, halfway through the journey, a saber blow destroyed the car they were riding in. Another cataclysmic level madman's fight was occurring nearby. The collateral damage was a nightmare. They weren't targets, but being there was dangerous. Apparently, one of the sages was fighting a combat robot, the so-called aggressors. Tomochika asked Yogairai if he could kill them for being in the way, but he still had some ethics. He didn't kill for no reason. Still, seeing the chaos, he decided to do it. The sage died in a flash. Meanwhile, a vampire sage was receiving Adelgert's report. The only witness they had left was blind, and even removing and regenerating his eye couldn't make him see. They tried turning him into a vampire to give him new abilities, but that didn't work either. The experiments came to an abrupt halt when someone crashed through the area, destroying half the castle. Back with Yogairai and Tomochika, the robot, seeing the situation, tried to negotiate a peace. He had nothing to offer, so Yogairai ignored him. After more walking, they arrived at Hanabusa, a Japanese-style town, peaceful at first glance. While Tomochika remained cheerful, Yogairai was already exhausted. After the long journey, Tomochika had the brilliant idea to tell Yogairai he should start exercising more. As if the guy hadn't already been saddled with a murder spree that nearly wiped out the forest's wildlife and several bandits by accident. His body probably already had scoliosis from the exertion, but of course, she had the nerve to criticize him. Seeing himself completely useless, Tomochika apologized and asked him to at least warn her when they were in danger so he wouldn't just walk around like nothing was happening. She asked if his ability had any limits, but Yogairai had no cooldown, no limits, no nothing. His power wasn't nerfed, so he could kill whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. They entered a futuristic-looking city and headed to the hotel Celestina had recommended. Upon arrival, they ran into an old classmate, Tachibana, who greeted them as if he hadn't abandoned them like rats. He explained that he'd separated from the group because his method of leveling up was more efficient: slavery. As soon as he arrived in the city, he formed a harem with several women: Erica, Stephanie, Chelsea, Euphemia, and Reza. They all hated Tomochika, but that didn't matter. Tachibana, with all the confidence of a lucky idiot, proposed that Tomochika become his slave or mistress, depending on what she wanted to call it. He even said he'd make an exception for Yogairai. He explained that he had the dominator class capable of subduing any weaker being. His strategy was to buy slaves, have them fight for him, and if they won, he'd make the defeated ones his slaves as well. It was basically a pyramid slavery scheme. Thanks to a classmate named Yutori, who had the consultant class, he discovered hidden details of his ability. Yutori helped him because his success depended on the success of others, and he preferred to avoid an internal war. Thus, Tachibana was leveling up without lifting a finger. He extended his offer to Tomochika once again, but she preferred to remain free, however little that meant. Yogairai commented that it might be safer to be near the top of the scheme, but it wasn't a real option. 3 days passed, and he slept while Tomochika did nothing until the zombie army attacked the city. She simply closed the curtains, hoping it would resolve itself. Lying down, Mocha warned her that someone was stalking her, but she couldn't see who. Desperate, Tomochika called Yogairai for help. He left her room, tracked down the murderous intent, and eliminated the attacker. It was Erica. He informed Tomochika that someone had indeed targeted her. Then, calmly, he asked for another coffin. Tachibana, who was in a dungeon, noticed that Erica had stopped responding. Although he didn't care much, he didn't want Tomochika to escape. Reza was sent to stop him, blocking the passage with ice. Yogairai killed the ice, Reza's wand, and made it clear that he could kill anything, even with a thought. Reza tried to play his last card, but was eliminated instantly. Then Chelsea appeared with some cursed dolls, which also didn't last. Faced with the overwhelming power difference, Chelsea gave up and spilled all the information. Tachibana, seeing that his henchmen were useless, activated his final card, an army of cockroaches. The idea was to suffocate Yogairai with insects, but as soon as he detected the hostile intent, he immediately killed Tachibana. Without their leader, the cockroaches stopped attacking, but no one was going to stay in that infested room. Stephanie and Euphemia found the corpse. Euphemia, now free, escaped, but outside, she found a wasteland where a forest had once stood. A dark presence had ravaged everything. The vampire sage appeared, bit her, and turned her into a vampire to get the truth out of her. He wanted to know what ability Yogairai had, and if she could truly kill with a mere wish. Meanwhile, Yogairai and Tamachika finally made it out onto the street, just as the zombie army she'd previously ignored became a real problem. Now things were about to escalate. In the middle of a city under siege, people were running wild in panic, living their own zombie hell. Yogairai and Tamachika took refuge in an alley to plan their next move. The undead were slow, so with a little care, they could slip away without much trouble. Still, Tamachika was hesitant to leave them all behind. Yogairai, for his part, never signed up to be a hero. From day one, he made it clear that the only reason he wouldn't let everything go to hell was because of Tamachika's physical charms. Meanwhile, Mayor Ryota was confronting the man responsible for the massacre, Masayuki, commander of the zombie army, who had arrived uninvited and with a license to kill, granted directly by the vampire sage, Lady Lane. Masayuki made it clear the priority was to find Yogairai and Tamachika, dead or alive. Ryota, with his ass on the line, had no choice but to hand over the city to him. Within minutes, the gates were sealed, and it was ordered that anyone who handed over Yogairai and Tamachika would be spared. But if they didn't appear within the hour, the dead would be the citizens. It was that simple. The population went from panic to frenzy, becoming a threat more dangerous than the zombies themselves. Tamachika didn't understand what all the fuss was about until she remembered that Yogairai had killed one of the sages. It was no small feat. Just as she said this, 3 idiots appeared from behind, ready to attack. One charged forward and ended up dead on the ground. The other 2 ran like rats. Yogairai wondered how the hell they were planning to catch him with civilians if he had no problem killing them too. Despite his general disinterest, he decided to go talk to Masayuki. The stench in the plaza was a mixture of death and decay. Yogairai wasn't going to sacrifice himself. He just wanted to negotiate. He wanted access to the train and to have the magic barrier deactivated. Masayuki, cocky, scoffed at his audacity. Yogairai, without batting an eyelid, offered him the chance to stay alive, an offer Masayuki foolishly rejected. He ordered his undead army to attack. He thought they were safe because they were technically dead, but Yogairai doesn't play by ordinary rules. He only had to say they should die, and they all fell. Masayuki stared at him, uncomprehending. If they were dead, how could they die again? Logic didn't matter. If they were still moving, Yogairai considered them alive. Masayuki tried to counterattack, but he didn't even finish transforming before collapsing. Ryota, on the verge of a heart attack, offered to tear down the barrier. He explained that Lane had given the direct order to eliminate Yogairai, and that the entire area was territory under his control. The irony was that they had been brought in as sage candidate, and now they wanted them dead. At that moment, Mocha appeared and warned that a spiritual manipulation had just caused all the citizens to feel murderous intent toward them. They tried to use the magic key to end the effect, but the controls were blocked. It was obvious Lane was behind the mental attack. Euphemia, now in Lane's employ, warned him that continuing to screw with Yogairai was playing with fire. The citizens began to attack them one by one, and Yogairai had no choice but to kill them. It had happened to him before when they used him as an experiment to see if he had any limit. But he didn't. The bodies piled up, and Ryota couldn't bear to watch his people fall any longer. From afar, Lane prepared. He knew that, with the approaching darkness, he could finish him off without any direct intent. He launched his backup plan. He duplicated his body in the sky. His clones had no information about Yogairai, so they couldn't hate him or have killing intent. Perfect for outsmarting his power. When the darkness arrived and turned everything to sand, Lane seized the moment to begin his bombardment. The sky filled with fire as the city crumbled under the destruction. Yogairai saw the attacks, but he couldn't sense any hostility. It was as if someone had pressed the annihilation button without even knowing why. As the city continued to be torn apart by explosions, Yogairai analyzed the situation while his face was buried in Tamachika's melons. This reminded him why he was still standing, so he stood up ready to resolve the mess. But finding the source of the attacks was another story. He looked around without identifying anything concrete. Tamachika was the first to notice. The bombs falling on the city were Lane clones, launching themselves like missiles. It was the perfect countermeasure against Yogairai's ability. The aftershocks didn't target him directly and exploded so quickly he couldn't even see them. Lane had found the only way to circumvent its power. Still, Ryota, as mayor, decided to contribute something useful for once and used his ability to track the attacks throughout the city, precisely identifying the next point of impact. She teleported them right to that spot. At the exact moment one of the clones was about to explode, Yogairai eliminated it, and Mocha summoned her spiritual shield, reinforcing its protection. The shield, originally a discrete shield, was transformed by Mocha's power into a full suit of armor. Tamachika was finally no longer a hindrance. All the clones were erased without a trace. Euphemia, observing the disaster, commented that maybe messing with Yogairai hadn't been such a good idea. Lane, convinced she could keep replicating herself, felt reality catch up with her. The scope of instant death had reached her as well. She realized it all too late. Elsewhere, a girl woke up inside a coffin. She was an autonomous copy of Lane, created as a contingency measure, a plan to survive the inevitable fate of her original version. Meanwhile, Yogairai and Tamachika prepared to leave the city, courtesy of a vehicle Ryota procured for them. On the other hand, the other students were also active. Ryuko, from the samurai class, had just defeated a monster and returned to her tent where Carol, another girl, was waiting for her. Carol had stolen Ryuko's phone to check the app they used to spy on Yogairai. It turned out that both of them had been assigned to monitor him before being transported to this world. They checked the monitor with concern. One of Yogairai's doors had opened. Not a good sign. Meanwhile, Tamachika was in charge of the Jeep's steering wheel, and it was clear she didn't know a thing about driving. They nearly killed each other several times, and since Yogairai was fast asleep, she had to drive alone. As they headed toward their next destination, Yogairai dreamed. In his mind, a woman in a suit appeared, signing an employment contract. The problem was that the contract included a clause exempting the company from any liability in the event of death. She was already too committed to back out. The bills wouldn't pay themselves. During the interview, she asked if it was a criminal organization. The man who hired her gave her an evasive answer, claiming that most of what they did was legal. Her job was to take care of a creature called Alpha Omega, an entity capable of killing anything with just a thought. Asaka, that was her name, had a suspicion the creature might be human, but her employer wasn't sure. He'd never seen it in person. The only thing that was clear was that they needed someone to act as an authority figure over such a broken creature. And yes, the only one who applied for the job was Asaka, so there was no other option. They reached the back of the complex, where they handed her a piece of paper and left her alone. She had to face the unknown without any support. As she crossed the door, she found herself in an artificially generated environment. In the midst of this illusory world, she walked toward a house that looked like something out of a children's storybook. And although she didn't know it yet, she was about to meet the source of the chaos unleashed in the outside world. Upon arriving at the underground house, Asaka called out to see if anyone was home. She ended up finding a brat in the main room. At first, she was nervous, but that turned to fury when she realized the government had imprisoned a child in that base. She wasn't going to stand idly by and watch him be treated like an experiment, so she dragged him out and threw him in the creek so he could play at least once in his fucking life. Yogairai was in shock for a second until he pointed his finger and killed a creature that had snuck up behind Asaka. He didn't know what it was, but it wouldn't be the first time some filth had gotten into his shadow. It was already dead, so it didn't matter. Yogairai said he'd like to play more, but it was getting late. Asaka, somewhat embarrassed at having stopped by, introduced herself and noticed the boy was hungry. As the adult in charge, she had to take charge of the food. She rummaged through the full pantry, but it was no use without knowing how to cook. She ended up resorting to the classic instant ramen. Luckily for her, Yogairai had never tried it before and happily devoured it. While eating, Asaka considered what to name him and ended up calling him Yogairai, after a dog she'd once owned. From that moment on, she became his mother figure. They were precious memories for Yogairai, who was abruptly awakened by Tamachika's scream. The path to the capital was blocked. She couldn't believe he could sleep with her insane driving, but he was exhausted from killing zombies. Besides, he didn't even understand why they were going to the capital. Supposedly, their goal was to return to their world, and to do that, they needed to find Shaun so they could look for another way. They decided to go around the mountain, but as they were backing up, Tamachika collided with a dragon. They got out of the vehicle to assess it, but the creature attacked. Yogairai instantly dispatched it. The problem was, it wasn't just one. There was an entire flock of dragons ready to exterminate them. They all fell one after another. Basically, Yogairai had just committed genocide in the Dragon Guard. But the story wasn't over yet. A golden dragon approached. It showed no killing intent, so Yogairai didn't kill it. When the dragon tried to flee, Yogairai called out to it under threat. Then Attila, the dragon's human form, appeared and explained that the attack was a test to see if he was worthy of meeting the Swordmaster. Yogairai wasn't interested, but Attila begged, promising to take them to the capital if they accompanied her. Reluctantly, they agreed. Upon arriving, they found a crowd. Everyone wanted wanted to meet the sword master and compete for the title of Divine King. Yogairai was criticized for arriving in a jeep, but the master didn't object. His welcome wasn't exactly friendly, though. He ordered them to kill each other until half of them were left. Yogairai tried to leave, but the master forbade him from leaving. As the contestants began killing each other, someone intervened to protect him. Rick, a gentlemanlike man, claimed it was all a test of honor. Yogairai continued eliminating enemies. Lionel, a man who had been cut in two, was restored thanks to a magic gem placed on him by a girl named Inara. The master, satisfied by the carnage, stopped the massacre and announced that the test would continue elsewhere. Attila begged Yogairai to continue the test. If he won and became Divine King, she would ascend. Having gathered no clues yet, they agreed to continue. Rick explained that the original Divine King had sealed the Dark God, but he was still a threat because cults were trying to revive him. Lionel explained that he was the victim of a cult until a goddess gave him apology gems. They could heal wounds or be exchanged for items, depending on how badly he did each day. Finally, a barrier separated the group, and the chosen ones entered a tower. Inside, the master showed a seal depicting hundreds of monsters and the Dark God. In the center, a girl was stabbing herself with it. Frederica tried to attack the Dark God, but the barrier slowed time, so the spell would take centuries to reach its destination. The challenge was to accumulate 100 points before leaving the tower. Tamachika wondered if Yogairai's ability would work on the Dark God despite the time delay. He didn't need to. Sensing the miasma, he located the source and eliminated it. He killed the Dark God in the cursed time loop before the test had even begun. Then he just wanted to escape before anyone noticed what he'd done. But just before he left, a familiar voice called out Lionel's name, reminding him that his troubles weren't over. Before starting the test, Inara demanded that Lionel give her one of his apology gems to replenish his mana. He agreed, but warned her that those things only worked for him. She took it anyway and left, leaving the poor guy without his crystal. The rest of the group, already on the move, were lucky. Those ahead activated almost all of the tower's traps, so they only needed to avoid what was left. But of course, they had Lionel with them. Just as Rick warned them to be careful, the idiot stepped on a magic circle and ended up impaled. Luckily, he still had gems left, so he healed. Donora suggested he carry one in his hand just in case. Lionel, feeling confident, dashed into a room alone, and his scream gave him away. He'd screwed up again. Rick went looking for him and found Teresa, a blood-soaked badass. She was a former knight of the Divine King, now unemployed, and determined to earn the title by slaughtering anyone who crossed her. Rick tried to keep her at bay while the others analyzed the situation. The room was full of string traps. Teresa had trapped them. Rick offered himself as a shield to help the others escape, but Teresa had no intention of leaving anyone alive. She attacked him ferociously, though she was clearly holding back. Donora noticed that if she got serious, Rick wouldn't hold out. Luckily, Yogairai had no time for games and sent her to the other world with his signature instant death. In the midst of the disaster, they found Lionel's severed hand, still with its gem. At least he was still alive. They reached the 98th floor of the tower, a secure area with individual rooms. Yogairai suggested they split up to rest. Rick agreed, though worried about leaving Yogairai and Donora alone. Lionel, with his last crystal, decided to lock himself in. There was only one free room, so they already knew what that entailed. Donora was nervous, but Mocha, being a good spiritual grandmother, said she was fine with the idea of a grandchild. Yogairai shamelessly undressed, but he just wanted to sleep. Meanwhile, Lionel received his new batch of apologies and an ultra-rare gacha. He rolled and got a woman, the goddess who brought him into this world. She only came to check that he was still alive and to update his save point. Then she left. At the control center, the homunculus monitoring everything reported that the number of souls collected didn't match the number of deaths. The chief didn't care much as long as the barrier remained active. They were also running out of half-demons to power the tower. Meanwhile, Awad, a girl with orders to recruit a target in the field, was met with hostility. The man named Satu used his tentacle-like defense ability, but it didn't work. Awad dodged everything, slashed at him, and was ordered to head to Hanabusa to eliminate Yogairai. Before leaving, he ran into Hanakawa, who had survived alone in the forest. He wanted to join her. Back at the tower, Yogairai and Donora were sleeping together. Mocha, watching them, crashed into a wall while trying not to interrupt a potential romantic scene. She became trapped in the spirit absorption mechanism. When Donora woke up and saw Yogairai hugging her, she was shocked, but Mocha explained that the tower was trying to absorb her. Yogairai located the mechanism and killed it. Mocha survived, and Yogairai promised to kill anything that posed a threat from now on. Moving forward, they came across a dragon, but a delusional girl said she didn't believe it could fly, and then the dragon fell. Its ability altered reality based on what it believed, but if the opponent was lucky, it didn't work. In the end, the dragon was decapitated by an aggressor who collected data and moved on. The tower's creator, fed up with the chaos, came down himself. He said the structure existed to keep the barrier and the Dark Lord sealed. Yogairai gave him one last chance to let them go without causing any more destruction, but he refused, so he killed him. Further ahead, they found two swordsmen fighting in front of a certain Misaki, a clown sitting on a throne. The man didn't let anyone pass without a fight. He called for his servants, but Yogairai killed them instantly, including Misaki himself. The demon girl he was fighting introduced herself as Theodisia. She said she had infiltrated the tower to find her missing sister. Seeing what Yogairai was capable of, she asked him to let her join the group so they could traverse the tower together and find answers. Helping Theodisia would have meant going head-on against the Swordmaster, but Yogairai and Tamachika had already made enough trouble that didn't matter. He agreed to help her only to search for his sister. Theo sensed a presence underground, so that would be their first stop. They were joined by Rick, Frederica, and Lionel, who was miraculously still alive. In the next room, the master was about to name the new divine king, but the homunculi interrupted him with bad news. The tower had collapsed, the first barrier had gone to hell, and the second was barely holding. Just then, a flash of light swept everything away. The person in charge descended, and the master, resigned, asked the candidates to help him fight. Yogairai, on the other hand, preferred to go with his people to search underground. It wasn't his problem. Rick and Frederica stayed behind. The Dark Angel demanded to know how to break the barrier, and when he got no answer, he began electrocuting people. The ninja tried to stop him with clones, who died instantly. Dorica launched a blast that was absorbed like nothing. Luke appeared, ripped off Frederica's arm, turned it into candy, and ate it. Rick attacked him without much success. Lionel, with zero sense of timing, activated his ultra-rare gacha, and the goddess appeared. This time, she was ready to fight. Everyone was excited until Orgame knelt before her. It turned out her plan was to revive the Dark Lord, her ex-boyfriend. Lionel had been her unlucky bait. Meanwhile, Yogairai and his men continued downward, trapped in a loop. A mysterious cut broke the trap. They reached the basement, where the demons from Theo's village had been turned into living slime. His sister wasn't there. She freed them and swore revenge. On the surface, the master named Rick his successor. Lionel asked the goddess why she was doing this, and she confessed that she was seeking to revive the Dark Lord. But upon breaking the core, the man fell dead. Yogairai had already killed him before. Theo took advantage of the chaos to cut off the master's head. The Blade Invader appeared and stabbed the goddess to extract information. She survived, but lost her sanity. The Dark Lord's followers attacked. Yogairai made his people cling to him just because, and killed them all in one fell swoop. Donora asked what to do with the goddess, but since she wasn't hostile, they left her. Meanwhile, another guy was dragging Hanakawa toward the tower, assuring them that everything would be fine because they had the classic protagonist armor. They were looking for Yogairai, but Rick warned them it wasn't the best time. Even so, the guy decided to help resolve the fight to find him faster. She scanned Rick and detected that he was now the new Swordmaster, so he must have enough power to kill the goddess. Rick lunged forward and managed to stab her in the stomach, finishing her off instantly. With that over with, she went to find Yogairai. It didn't take long to find him in the dust, but upon scanning him, she immediately regretted it. The information she gleaned was so absurd it made her nauseous. Yogairai was the end-all-be-all in human form. There was absolutely nothing that could defeat him. She vomited out of pure fear. Seeing her, Yogairai asked if she was okay, but she, terrified, walked away with some cheap excuse, leaving Hanakawa lying like an old rag. In the end, only a few remained alive. Rick wanted to ask several questions, starting with Theo's decapitation of the Swordmaster, but she maintained that it was entirely justified. Rick didn't like the man, but now that he was in his place, he felt a little more responsible. Yogairai suggested he check out the basement and see for himself what kind of shit the old master was up to. If he still wanted to go after Theo after that, he'd get in the way himself. Rick didn't understand who he was really talking to until he was told that Yogairai had killed the Dark Lord himself and all his followers. There was nothing he could do to stop him, so he accepted Yogairai's claim as unquestionable. She wanted to know what they would do now. Theo assured her that he would continue searching for his sister Euphemia. Yogairai and Tamachika remembered hearing that name in Hanabusa, so she headed there. They, for their part, were heading to the capital. Rick gave them 2 pendants that would allow them entry without complication. Once ready, they departed, leaving Hanakawa behind again. In another corner of the world, Awad's superior received news that he had disappeared after his encounter with Yogairai. He began to wonder who this man really was, so he decided to summon someone who knew him on Earth, a scientist. She asked him about Yogairai, but upon learning that she had brought him into this world, he thanked her as if she had saved all of humanity. However, Yogairai's use of power activated a hidden protocol in his body, and the scientist exploded into 1,000 pieces. The only thing that was clear was that not even those who knew him knew what Yogairai really was. Subscribe so you don't miss the next part.